How are we doing today? Thank you so much for inviting me to be here today. I'm so grateful to be joining here and really reflecting on the legacy and having my beautiful family here today. I know that we have a little bit of history here, and this is actually my first time stepping into this space. So I just wanted to say how deeply humbled and honored I am to have the opportunity to reflect on really bridging our differences and speaking from the perspective of an Indigenous, an Afro-Indigenous youth here. And one thing that I really want to carry and speak on the importance here that I've really been finding myself being grounded in this work in is reflecting on leadership and civic engagement. And through that, I have been honored to speak across this city and really engage with all members of various communities. And in doing so, I've been reflecting on an honor of my own of being named a recipient of the Reverend John Christie Holland Sankofa Pearl Scholarship and Bursary. And in doing so, I really want to reflect on his leadership and his legacy, and I want folks to really understand all of his work and how it is being grounded through the principle of Sankofa, but really through all the words that I speak. It's grounded in the intention, and it also allows me to really reflect on my roots of Ghana, of being Indigenous, and being from Hamilton. And so when I think about the question, what does it mean to practice, to rediscover solidarity, I think about the difference between saying we care about each other and actually showing up for each other. As an Afro-Indigenous youth and student leader, I've had to navigate spaces where parts of my identity are seen and other parts are often misunderstood or even erased. That experience has shaped how I understand solidarity. And for me, solidarity is not just a label. It's not something that you claim. It's something that you practice consistently and even when it's uncomfortable. I often say, solidarity is not a moment, it's a commitment. Because too often, we see people show up when something is trending, but when there's urgency, when there's visibility. But real solidarity is what happens after the attention fades. It's in the quiet and everyday choices to stand with people, to advocate, and to stay engaged. I see this a lot in my role specifically as Sagawana Galadats. So that's the Indigenous Student Trustee role here at the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board, which in the Mohawk language translates to, they raise the voice of their community. And in doing so, I've really grounded my work once again in understanding who's sitting at the table currently with us and sharing their perspective, but also who's not. And the beautiful language in surrounding that is raising the voices of those communities. And in order to understand and be able to raise their voices, we need to be present in those communities at all times and to really understand the times that are facing us. And so in practice, rediscovering solidarity means recognizing that our struggles are deeply interconnected. As an Afro-Indigenous person, but really as a Hamiltonian, we carry the impacts of both anti-Black racism and the ongoing colonialism that continues to affect all that we are doing. And sometimes those conversations are separated. But solidarity asks us to refuse that separation. It asks us to see how systems of oppression overlap and how our liberation is tied together. It also means listening deeply and intentionally, not listening to respond or to fix, but listening to understand. I've learned that you can't stand with someone if you're not willing to hear them fully. And that kind of listening requires humility. One of the 7 principles of the Ascending Grandfather teachings, something that I carry very much in my work as an Anishinaabe Ojibwe youth. And it requires us to step back and to make that space, but also to recognize when a voice other than our own needs to be centered in these conversations. Another part of solidarity in practice is responsibility. I think sometimes we confuse allyship with solidarity, but they're not the same. Allyship can be passive. Solidarity is active. It requires accountability. It asks, what am I doing with the privilege, the access, or the platform that I currently have? And how am I using it to support others, not just myself? In my role as a student leader, solidarity looks like advocating for students whose voices aren't always heard. It looks like making sure that when decisions are being made, they reflect the realities of those most impacted. And it looks like building relationships that are rooted in trust reciprocity, and care, not just convenience. And that connects directly to the second question. What does it look like to bridge differences? Because bridging differences is not about pretending these differences don't exist. It's not about finding the quickest way to agree. It's about choosing to stay in conversation even when it's hard. To me, bridging differences starts with creating spaces where people feel safe enough to be honest, where people can bring their full identities into the room without the fear of being dismissed or misunderstood. Because if people don't feel safe, they won't be real. And if they're not real, we're not actually bridging anything. I've seen in my own experience that difference can either divide us or deepen our understanding of each other. And the deciding factor is how we are going to approach it. If we come in with assumptions, with defensiveness, we create more distance. But if we come in with curiosity, with openness, we can create connection. One thing that I've learned is that bridging differences is not about erasing them. It's about learning how to hold them with respect. Especially as a youth, I've learned how to exist in multiple spaces where different perspectives, histories, and differences intersect. And that has taught me that there is strength in complexity. Bridging differences also requires great patience. It's not quick work. It takes time to build understanding, to build trust, and to unlearn biases. And it takes humility to admit that we don't always have the answers and that we still have more to learn. In practice, it looks like asking questions instead of making assumptions. It looks like being willing to sit in discomfort instead of avoiding it. And it looks like making sure that marginalized voices are not just included, but are truly centered in the conversation. Because at the end of the day, bridging differences is not just about dialogue. It's about what we do with that dialogue. It's about turning understanding into action. And I think that both of these ideas, rediscovering solidarity and bringing differences, comes back to the same core principle, relationship. Because real change doesn't happen in isolation. It happens through the relationships we build, the trust we create, and the responsibility we take for one another. So if I had to leave you with one final thought, it would be this. Solidarity is how we stand with each other, and bridging differences is how we stay with each other. So in doing so, how can we make it? And it's not always about changing people's minds. I think it's how we're engaging in that and making that positive change. Because it's important to recognize that both are necessary. And if we want to create communities that are not only inclusive but truly transformative, then we can implement those. Thank you. Merci, miigwech.